So based upon that, and just kind of looking at what are some of the challenges that come when talking about Oracle, and so we got some great feedback actually from the registration list, and a couple of those were things around virtualization, entitlements, ULAs, the complexity and understanding of the data output. And so I've lumped these into three different types of categories. The first one is related to your agreements. So really it kind of comes down to few questions that I look at up front is like, do you have all of your agreements consolidated in one platform location? Do you have copies of those available? The agreements, the order documents, the renewals. Have you gone through them and reviewed them? Understand what your customer definition is, any regional limitations, restricted rights, limited rights. And the big one is obviously ULAs. Are you exploring it? There were a couple of registrations that indicated they were doing so or in the middle of a ULA. Do you have a strategy for it as you approach the termination of that? You're going to be potentially renewing or certifying. I'm a big fan of ULAs if you have a business case for it, and if you can keep on top of it to ensure you're getting your value out of them when it comes due, and that you're working from a position of knowledge as you decide what your next steps are, whether that be to certify or renew. And so that knowledge thing is definitely a key thing, and how do you operate from that? Obviously, number one is knowing your agreements. That's saying contract is king, and that's very applicable. Then we have to start looking at your actual usage. So what kind of tools do you have in your environment to capture the necessary data points? When talking about databases, for example, are you able to get that granular level of detail, to know what is triggering a usage of an option or a pack? Are you trusting your DBAs to self-report? Are you keeping information in a spreadsheet? Are you just running some basic SQL scripts or commands to pull limited data? Or even do you potentially have a SAM tool in place to collect it? And if so, what are you actually collecting out of that tool? One of the things before I left Oracle, I was helping out in a couple different points, but one of the things is they had a third-party tool vendor program where they were working with vendors to get them verified such that if Oracle were to come audit them, they could use a tool to augment, apologize, to collect the data and augment the running of scripts through that. One of the things, the warning on that though, is there can be thousands to millions of lines of output coming back in these script results or the data that's being provided over. And so that can be kind of daunting to look through and understand exactly what's happening. This program is still ongoing, and it's going to be one of the topics that we'll talk about here shortly. There's a reason that SAM tools exist, and to collect these data points, as they can be quite extensive, and the experience that's needed to process it, can take years to gain. Like I said, I was at Oracle for about 13.9 at LMS, and it can take you a while to learn the nitty gritty of it. So we talked about agreements. We talked about need to build the ability to collect measurement data, and then what? Well, it's that so what of ensuring compliance, taking those two data points and combining them together. Oracle makes it very easy for people to download and use their products. This was always a fun conversation when I was on the audit side. As really they put the requirement and compliance on a customer. So are you actively monitoring your usage? Databases, are you looking at options and packs? Oracle makes it very easy to use them, and they may have limited or no language that pops up to say, hey, you're using something that needs to be licensed. Are you tracking different types of metrics? Do you have legacy metrics in play, and are you managing those proactively? Are you deploying in a virtualized environment? Again, that was one of the biggest questions that came in on the registration. If so, are you aware of Oracle's partitioning policy and the door that it can open up to require more licenses that you may not have thought you needed? One of the roles when I was at Oracle was to actually review what we referred to as a segmentation or exception approval when it comes to customers who are using, let's just say VM, for example, and you wanted to limit the exposure on that instead of having to license multiple vCenters or multiple clusters, et cetera, how that can be configured. And so, I'm able to take that knowledge and work with customers now to ensure that, okay, you potentially segmented your environment in a way that Oracle would accept, and can ring fence, for lack of better terms, what would be required. Another topic is Java. Since Oracle has transitioned to a subscription model, it's placed more responsibility on the customers to actually know what versions of Java they're running, and if there's a need to have a subscription for it.